Hey everybody, welcome to Pit Stops to Podium, the Red Partners podcast, where we talk to execs who have competed and won, taking their companies from high growth to high scale. My name is Brendan Tollison. I am the co-founder and CEO of Red Partners, and I'm delighted to have with me today Sterling Snow for this episode of Pit Stops to Podium. Welcome, Sterling.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Sterling is the CRO of Divvy, a really fast-growing technology company. But Sterling, I'll give you the opportunity to share a little bit about who Divvy is.
Yeah, so the easiest way to think about us is that we married expense management, spend management software, and corporate credit cards. So if you're familiar with things like Expensify, Concur, plus, your American Express corporate card program, we married those and made the software free and do that for businesses. Founded in 2016 by Blake Murray and Alex Bean, and went crazy, like very, very, very fast growth, and was acquired, 7-8 months ago by Bill.com for $2.5 billion. So as far as we've been able to tell, the fastest B2B exit of over $2 billion that we've found. So really, really fun. Still enjoying it. Lots of good learnings along the way, but that's us.
That's great. Yeah, that's quite a story, quite a ride. And I think it'll be great for our audience to hear a little bit about some of your insights in light of being a unicorn status and having that exit. But Sterling, before we get into the big idea today, we do have a tradition here at Pit Stops at Podium, and that's to get to know our guest outside of work. So what are 3 fun facts that our audience should know about you?
Yeah, I'm an incredibly boring person, but I'll give it my best shot. These are fun/weird facts. I play basketball with a group of folks, and I don't live particularly close to that group. So I have to get up at 4:30, 4 days a week to drive for like an hour to play basketball. That's one of the facts.
Is it because you like basketball so much, or you like this group so much?
It is literally both of those things. Like, I could find basketball closer, and I love basketball, but it's the combination. And a lot of us, we've been playing together now for 7-8 years. So it's like friend time plus exercise time, and worth the drive, I guess.
That's great. Well, this recording is happening during March Madness. So do you have a team that you're rooting for this tournament?
I'm rooting. I'm a big Coach K fan when you talk about exceptional leaders, and so man, I would just love if he could go out with a win, even though probably a little too Cinderella. But that's my what I'm rooting for.
Okay. All right. Well, what are the 2 other facts that our audience should know?
So I'm from a very small town that people kind of get a kick out of when I tell them the name of it. It's called Winnemucca, Nevada. It's about 2 hours outside of Reno. Population of 10,000 folks. That's where I was born and raised. Kind of fun.
And now you're in Utah, right?
Now I'm in Utah, and Utah's not New York or San Francisco, right? but it's a lot different than Winnemucca, Nevada. It's great. And then last fact for me is that my wife and I are actually having our first baby in 60 days.
Oh, wow.
So getting ready to be a first-time dad here, and freaking out a little bit about all the stuff I don't know, but looking forward to it.
Do you have the house set up yet?
Got the house set up, but I will tell you, figuring out a name is I don't know how people do it. And I know you have 3 kids, and you need to tell me how you pick names, because we're struggling.
I delegated that to my wife. That's how that worked. So
nice.
I don't know if it's the right strategy or not, but it worked for us.
I thought you would just ruffle through all your CRMs and run a quick query and find the best name.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing a little bit about who you are outside of work. It's always fun to just get to know our people in that context, because we are human beings. We're not just human doers. And I think it's actually a good transition to the topic that you are passionate about. And, we talked a little bit about Divvy's success as it relates to building so quickly and selling at, that $2+ billion mark. And so one of the big idea that we're going to talk about today that you can speak to intimately is this whole concept of success versus significance. And I'd love for you to unpack really what that means to you and how you think about it. And we'll dive into some of the topics that relate to it.
Yeah. A lot of times those are two words that I think get super conflated, and they do often happen in parallel, like your success and your significance, those or the significance of a task and the success of it. They do happen in parallel a lot, but they're also very different things, and they aren't always going to happen side by side. And so just understanding that you need to focus on the significance, and the success is correlated and will happen, but make sure you're not like putting the cart before the horse. So there's a couple ideas I think we're going to talk about that highlight the distinction between the two and how you can attack it.
Yeah, I like how when we were prepping for this, you talked about this whole concept of becoming, and that's where the priority needs to lie. And so when we think about how does like practical application of how to prioritize significance, there are a few areas that I think you can speak to. I think the first topic let's park on is around this idea of who you're surrounding yourself with. I think that's a really critical ingredient to it. So let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. We all have those relationships where we feel like you get energized from the interactions, and then we all have the relationships where it's like, oh man, I don't really want to go and have that conversation. It's really draining, and so you almost dread doing it. And I think about like we're dealing with as a society, right? Burnout on kind of an unparalleled level. And I think in a lot of ways, we're just getting the surrounding ourselves with people wrong. For me, the formula that I've found that works for me, that's not necessarily right for everybody, but it's very high ambition and very high humility. That is the kind of person that I just get energized with. And, I work 20 hours a day with that kind of a person, right? And hopefully I can be that kind of person to other folks. But I think that like burnout comes from friction, burnout comes from losing, burnout comes from frustration. And so surrounding yourself with those people at work is a big way to take a dent out of that. And then relating back to the larger topic, if you're surrounding yourself with those kinds of people, that's who you're going to end up looking like and becoming like. So if you want to, if ambition and achievement and significance and success is high, you need that high ambition. But you also want a very high degree of humility so that people enjoy working with you and being on your team and being in the trenches with you.
I like that a lot. The previous buzzword or like phrase would be like work-life balance. And so I think you're kind of speaking into that a little bit as it relates to the burnout concept, but maybe unpack that a little bit further for our team as well.
Yeah, totally. Because this might not be popular at all. I think it has nothing to do with work-life balance. I've had times in like the Divvy journey where we were working like insane amounts of hours, but we were probably the most energized we've ever been. One thing I do on a weekly basis with all my direct reports and therefore all the departments is we have an emotional score, 1 to 10. So if you're coming in at a 5, like you don't have a lot in the tank emotionally, so to speak. But we've had times where we were really redlining from a work perspective, but the emotional scores were like 8s, 9s, 10s. And so it's a lot about the type of work you're doing and who you're doing it with. Not as much like, am I just, having the right amount of hours? Because life's not like that. You have 3 kids and sometimes they require all of your attention for a period of time, right? And sometimes work's crazy and you're going to go all in on it, or you're really excited about something you're building or doing. And so it's not really balance. It's more like doing the things that you want to be doing with the people you want to be doing them with.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm curious to see how this plays out for you in 60 days when you have a newborn. It should be fun to have that conversation. But Sterling, I really like those insights. And I think it's a good transition into the next topic, which is getting into this whole concept of maximizing your time and talent. So, we all have a finite amount of time. There's infinite work to do. So how do you think through what to prioritize and how to make sure you're making the largest impact with it?
Yeah, you said it very well. The phrase that I use is life. Like this is a timed event and we're all on the clock, and the clock is constantly ticking and you don't know exactly how much you have, but you can make some assumptions. and you know you need to maximize it, right? And so the idea that who you become, I'm not graded on the same absolute basis as you are. You are probably far more talented than me. So what I'm being graded against is getting as much out of my ability and my time as I can. And that's in all aspects of life, but we spend so much of our lives working and on the things that we do professionally. So how do you do that? The analogy is like when you have a bottle of toothpaste and you squeeze it out, do you take the time to like roll it and then squeeze it again? Do you actually get all of the toothpaste out of the canister? And how do you do that with like life? And to me, the thing that I've seen in the people I admire the most in terms of maximizing their time and talent is they work backwards. They set very ambitious types of goals that are years out, right? And then they work backwards. I think that it's super easy to just get in the flow of life. You wake up, you go to work, you stop, you watch your TV show, you hang out with your family, you go to a weekend. But the act of being purposeful and the act of planning, I think is very crucial to actually getting the most out of your time on this earth, getting the most out of your talent on this earth, and becoming who you were meant to be and having the impact that you were meant to have.
I like that. It's one of those, the reality is it's something we can all control. Mm-hmm. And it's who's going to be intentional and who's not. And if you're willing to be intentional, then you're able to have that impact that you're describing, which I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not exclusive. So it's all skate if you want to do it. Absolutely.
Like you're right. It's not easy, but it is simple. And the people who I really admire, like they are so purposeful. That means you say no to things. That means you say yes to things. Like it just dictates everything in a much different way. And it's a proactive approach versus a reactive approach. So naturally you get more out of it.
Well, I think it's a really good segue in the next topic. So we've talked about who do you surround yourself with? We've talked about how to maximize your time and talent. And I think this gets into the purpose and intention a little bit more, but it's how do you set and maintain high standards for yourself? So let's unpack that a little bit.
This is a really interesting one for me because I have failed here like many, many times. I used to just try and get really talented people to come and be on the team, right? Because I knew you were smart, I knew you were good, and you'd come in and then we would figure out that like the thing that I was building, the standards that I was setting weren't the ones that you wanted to chase. And I cannot give you that desire, nor should I, right? Like that's going to lead to some of the stuff we talked about earlier, burnout, frustration, misalignment, all that stuff. So what I've learned about setting and maintaining high standards is be very, very collaborative when you're setting those. So if you're interviewing somebody, for example, talk about it. What your vision is. Say, hey, we want to be a company that grows 200% year over year. That's a wildly hard thing that a lot's going to go into that. Does that excite you or does that make you nervous? Or does that set off yellow flags or red flags? Because you can start to set the standard with them. And if they're getting excited by it, they're saying, oh, heck yeah, that's exactly the kind of environment that I'm looking at, fast paced and go and take the hill type mentality. Well, then it's going to be much easier for you to hold each other to those standards. Hey, remember when we said we wanted to grow 200% year over year? It's not me trying to hold you to a standard that you didn't agree to or even really care about. And so that's really the only way I've found out how to do it. If you compare it to a sports team, it's like if our goal is to win a championship, that means it's easier for me to hold you accountable to being in the gym, to doing the workouts, to showing up and practicing hard. But if that wasn't your goal, if your goal was just to have a nice career and to make a few bucks, you're not going to really care about putting in the extra effort. So it's really about accurately describing the standards and getting the buy-in and making that a collaborative process, because then you get to hold each other accountable to it and push each other towards it.
Yeah, it's creating clarity and setting the expectations. That's something that we had Kevin Gaither on the podcast a few months ago, and Kevin used to be the SVP of sales at ZipRecruiter. And so he talked about how to recruit and retain sales talent. And it's a lot of what you just described of like one of the core elements that people sometimes neglect is clearly defined expectations. And when there's that alignment between the employer and the employee, there's no room for ambiguity. And to your point, it drives that accountability that oftentimes it's hard to do because no one really knows how they're being measured and what's expected of them.
Yeah. And you talked about earlier, just like the finite amount of time we have, life's too short to do to get like misaligned like that. There is a company, I promise, that will want you to be like your version of yourself. And that might not be like a hard charging, go and grow a bunch. That might be something very different. But just take the time to like find that. And as people who are leaders, take the time to explain that and attract the right team so that you're not constantly like grading on each other, you know?
Yeah, I like that. I think there's the underlying theme of, we've talked a little bit about, intentionality, being proactive, but there's also this relational component here because, it's, a rising tide lifts all boats concept of like, especially when you have a big ambitious goal that you talked about, like it requires more than just you. And which I like that you've just described is it goes back to the first point of who are you surrounding yourself with, because that's ultimately going to dictate who you're becoming and what your life is really going to look like from a significant standpoint, because we weren't meant to live in isolation, both personally and from a professional standpoint. So this has been a good reminder for me. Sterling, as we wrap up, I've benefited from this tremendously. Thank you for your insights. If our audience wants to engage with you or learn more about Divvy, what would you recommend?
Yeah, so pretty active on both Twitter and LinkedIn. Sterling M. Snow on Twitter and Sterling Snow on LinkedIn. Pretty active both places there. And then we're hiring a ton. Also, you can just go check out the website, getdivvy.com, and take a look at us and what we're doing.
Great. Well, Sterling, before we close, any last thoughts or comments as we wrap up?
I really enjoyed the conversation, and I think that what we did was we said, hey, focus on the things that are significant and you will see success. Just be purposeful and intentional about what that actually looks like for you. What is significant to you? That's a highly variable question. So enjoyed it, and thanks for having me.
I like it. You got into leading and lagging indicators in my world, so and in your world too. So when you prioritize the right things, other areas follow. So Sterling, thanks so much. We really appreciate your time, your insight, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah, take care. Thanks.